Mhm.
All right, so welcome to CS 199. And I hope you guys can all see my screen. Um, so so today we're going to be doing some more practice problems just like last time. We'll review some topics for a couple of minutes, and then I will let you guys work on some problems together, and then we'll go through the solutions. So that's how this is going to work. And then we're also going to be posting all the recordings for all of our sessions on the forum and also on the website. So so just want to remind everybody that this is kind of an interactive session. So there's no need to be, shy or afraid to share code. It's just supposed to help you provide more assistance, and I hope that you guys are able to learn more from it. Okay, so this is where the course site is. I know somebody had asked earlier about some things about the course. So this course site should provide some more information about feedback forms, attendance forms, and all of our recordings are on there. All the slides are on there for more reference. Okay, so let's get into today's topics. Today we're going to be going through compound conditional statements, arrays, and for loops. Okay. So compound conditional statements, I think you guys covered this last week. And basically what they allow us to do is they allow us to take these conditional expressions that we've been working with using all these conditional operators like less than, greater than, equal to, and allows it to create more complex decision-making code. So they're just a bunch of if-else statements that are combined together using different conditional operators. And okay, so let's take a look at some code, and you guys can, I'm gonna maybe ask some questions and you guys can answer them in the chat or unmute yourself and answer them. So for this piece of code here, what is the conditional expression and what is the conditional statement? Like what would be the conditional statement? What would be the conditional expression? Any ideas?
My height less than your height is the conditional one,
Mm-hmm.
and integer your height equals 182 is a statement.
Okay, you're almost there. So the conditional expression is in fact this piece right here, my height less than your height.
Oh wait, yeah, I got it. It's if my height less than your height. Is that true?
So yeah, this
Okay.
whole like if else block right here would be the conditional statement. And since we're combining multiple ifs and else here, we would consider this to be a compound conditional statement. Okay, so in this case, we have my height equals 149 and your height equal to 182. And then we have this if else code. What do you think this code will output? Any thoughts?
Maybe it's it should print I'm shorter than you. Is that right?
Right. So 149 is indeed less than 182, so it'll print I'm shorter than you. Yep. All right, so I guess what I was trying to get at here is that when you see an if else block, the way that it typically works is that it'll go in the order that it's written in. And if the condition in the if statement is true, then it will run or execute that code inside of that if block. And then if there's an else statement, then you know that it'll run this code in this block if this condition up here is not true. And then finally, there's an else if block also sometimes if we have a second condition that we want to check, but this is an optional thing that's not required for every if else block. And same with the else block. You technically only need the if block. You don't need these other points. But if you wanted to do something when the height was greater than your height, then you could have an else if. And then this would execute. Does anybody know when this block of code would execute? What condition would basically allow this to execute?
When my height is equal to your height.
Yep. Great, because this block of code was not true and this block of code was not true, then this block of code must run. All right, so that is a review of compound conditional statements. Are there any questions before we get into the practice? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no and continue. So we have two practice questions. You can just use the CS125 on the website. There is a play we have the GED playground here, and if you just type in your code here and then hit the run button, it'll also run. So that's what you can do. All right, so you have 10 minutes. So I'll set the timer for 6:21, and then we'll rejoin and regroup. So feel free to chat amongst yourselves, have conversation. If something is confusing, you can also ask me. if you guys are done, you can let me know in the chat, and we can go ahead and start reviewing the answer.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, cool. Looks like everyone's pretty much done. So, does anyone want to share their answer or code, or should we head straight into the solution? You guys can put it into the chat if you want to share your code, and I can give some feedback, or I can go through it myself. Okay, we got a volunteer. Yeah, so from first glance, this looks like it's right. So this is for the second question. How about let's do the first question, and then go through the second one. Okay, so I got a picture. Yep, so this one looks pretty accurate, the picture that was just sent to me. So I will just review the question real quickly. Okay. So the question basically asked us to come up with a compound conditional statement that would print out if two integers were they were greater than each other, less than each other, or whether they were equal to each other. So let's see. So let's just call my integers x and y. So typically you'd have to initialize them, but in this question, they don't tell us to. So we're just going to say if they're equal to each other, if x is equal to y, then make sure I have the question up. Yeah. So if x is equal to y, then print out equal to each other. Okay, and then else if x is greater than y, system dot out print when greater than each other. And finally, so you can put in this else if you want, but you don't have to. It's dot out, that's correct. Yes. Okay. So whatever you had in the print statement could be slightly different from what I have because it really didn't specify what you should print out, but this is the general idea for how your if statement should be set up. And then what you can do is test it by setting it equal to 1 and 3. So int x is equal to 1 and int y equal to 3. And so since 1 is less than 3, should print less than each other. Yep, so that looks good. All right, that is great. Any questions on this before I move on to the next question? And then just make sure the chat is open. Okay, great. So the next question, we also had somebody share in the chat their code, and from the looks of it, it looks correct. Yep, that looks correct to me. The way I do it will be slightly different, but I think they're both going to be the same. So let me just type out the solution. So it asks if your test score is greater than or equal to 90, then your grade will be an A. Else, if your test score is, oops, my bad. Greater than or equal to 80, then please stand right when B. And then finally, and then they asked us to initialize they asked us to see what would be printed out if we had an integer called score and it was equal to 75. Oops. So it should be C. And I had some people write it so that it was like this, and then we had like and test score is less than 90. But you don't really need to do that. It's kind of redundant code because you have a check for if it's greater than or equal to 90. So you already know that by default, this will be true when you get to this if statement. Okay, any questions on that? So far, so good. Good. Let's head on back then. All right, so now we're done with that. So let's take a look at arrays. Arrays are, I think you guys covered that yesterday in CS 125. And they're essentially just ways to store sequential data in Java. So the general syntax of it looks pretty similar to this, where we have the data type and then 2 brackets, the variable name equals new, the data type again, and then brackets. And then you put inside of the brackets the length of the array that you want to create. So yeah, you want to get familiar with this syntax. You'll be using arrays quite frequently. So just knowing the syntax early on will help when you're starting to work with it a little bit when you're getting to like tougher problems. And then there's another way that you can initialize an array. And this is the second way. But can you tell me what's different about this way of initialization versus this way of initialization? What are you doing here that you're not doing here? Anybody? Any takers? Yeah, I mean, that's one difference. One's for characters, one's for integers. Guess I'll go ahead and say it. In this particular version, you're actually setting the values of the array. First one means there are 8 integers. Yes, you're right. The first one is 8 integers. So the only difference in the syntax between the two is that in this version, you're initializing or declaring the array, and you're initializing each of the values in the array to be something. So you could have written this in this form, but it wouldn't have been initialized to X, Y, Z, and F. And I think they would have been initialized to something else, but I don't remember off the top of my head what that is in Java. So this is just combining 2 different steps. The first step is creating the array, the space for the array, and then the second step is initializing every single space in the array to be something that you want it to be. Okay, and then let's take a look at some other syntax. So in this particular statement, the second line of code here, we are setting the 0th index of the array heights to be 149. So why did we start with 0? Does anybody remember? Why not start with 1? Or how come we're starting with 0? I guess that's a better question. Yep. So in arrays and in most of computer science and most programming languages, you start with 0 for indexing, and then it goes up until 1 minus the length of the array. So the first index in heights will be index 0, and the last will be 19. Hence, this piece of code will have an issue because you're trying to index at 20, but there's actually no index 20 in heights. It only goes up to 19. So just something to keep in mind as you go throughout this. And then this one, does anyone know what this will print? Yep, 149. Great. So now we'll go into the practice questions. You've got 10 minutes, so we'll meet back at 6:42. And just let me know in the chat if you guys are done so we can end it a little bit early and move on to the next topic. Also, so it looks like everyone is done. So let's go ahead and review this problem. So I got some solutions in the chat. And I guess maybe do you want to go through that solution, or you want to maybe explain what you were doing there, or do you want me to go ahead and just write out my solution? Okay. All right, so I will go ahead and write this out. Right, so first it wants us to create a Boolean array of, Boolean array example. Yeah. Boolean array example with 7 characters. Okay, and then it asked us to set the last thing to be true. So remember that I think they're all initialized to be false, like every single index in this array is initially false, and then we set this one to be true. And then, so when I'm indexing by 6, 6 is the last index of this array, because there's only 7 elements, and we index by 0. And then the second question, the next piece of this is a char array with 4 elements. Okay, so this would be the first. So in this where it says initialize an array with 4 elements, so this would just be that first part of it. And then the second piece of it would be to set every single thing in this array to be something. Sorry, not char. Should be array. Yeah, so it should be array. The array 2 equals C, and 3 equals D. And yeah, so you could combine all of these steps together by just doing C, D. Okay, that should be good. Yep. And then you can also do it this way. Let's make sure there's no errors in my code. Yeah. So that should be the solution for this problem. And then there was a bonus question, will this print the values in the height array? So it will not. This will just print like the memory address for this array, but I won't go into too much detail on what that means or what that does. That's something you'll gradually learn as we go throughout the semester, what it means to print out the memory address. If you wanted to print out every single value in this array, what you could use is a for loop, which is our next topic. So for loops, I think you probably got, I don't know if you guys have gotten to this in this lecture. I think it might be today's topic, but it basically allows you to run blocks of code many different times, and it allows you to set the number of times that it will run by using some sort of condition. So let's take a look at this for loop here. It will start with 0, and then it'll have a variable that starts with 0. So this variable is initialized in this for loop, and it'll increment with every single iteration of this for loop, and then it'll stop after it reaches 15. So this is the condition that has to be true while this for loop is running. And once this condition is false, then this for loop stops running. So in this case, when will this for loop stop for this particular problem? What value does age end up being when this stops? Yep. So we had someone in the chat put 14. Yep. So it'll run from 0 all the way up till 14. But it will not print out 15. I'm 15 years old. So that is the review on for loops. Now let's look at some problems. And I'll give you guys 10 minutes to work on this. Let me know in the chat when you guys are done. And we'll go ahead and start reviewing the problem. So that will be 6:55. So I just realized there is a typo in this question. This last question, when it says when the counter for your age is your current age, print out hooray. It should actually say when the counter for your age is 2, print out hooray. So we'll fix that and the slides will be updated soon, but just wanted you guys to know as you're working on it. Okay, so 10 minutes are up, so let's go ahead and review these questions. I know there were some questions in the chat about it, so let's take a look. So the first one asks you to create a for loop that would go from your current age or not your current age, from when you were 1 up until when your current age. So while it's not equal to 23, and then every single iteration, it should print out your age. My age. Okay, so in this for loop, it's going from 1 and it's going up till 23 and it's incrementing by 1 every single time. So the counter in the for loop would be like this, this variable, my age, and each iteration would be every single time that this loop runs. Okay, so the second question asks you to initialize 0 and for every single iteration up until 0, sorry, not 0, sorry to ask you to initialize it to 50. And you're supposed to run it all the way until 0, and then in order for it to decrement, to do negative signs like that. And then you would just print out the value of Z, the counter, at every iteration. And then, okay, I see there's a question in the chat. Okay, that's just a sample code, I see. Yep. Yep, that looks correct. And then for the last question, the last question combined if statements and for loops. So it asks us to do something like this, where you're iterating from your current age, and then you're going to go all the way until 0, and you're going to update every single time with 2. And then inside the loop, it's asking you to check when your age is equal to 2. System.out.print when and just top array. Okay. Okay. So I think everything in there worked correctly. So in the first question, it runs from 1 up until 23. It's my current age. And then the second for loop runs from 50 all the way down to 0. So it starts at 50 here, and then it goes all the way till 0. And then the last one prints out array. So that is the gist of this. Are there any questions about that? I know I'm guessing that the last question must have been a little bit more complicated than the previous ones. Okay. Yep, looks like some people got it. Yep. Your code looks correct, although I don't know why you're incrementing x in the for loop. You don't need to increment x. You can just decrement I, and otherwise it should be correct. Are there any other questions? you can unmute yourself if you have questions. I know that we're at the end of our time. So please share any feedback if you have any, and if you need to take attendance, the attendance link is on the website. I would like to know if you guys thought these problems were too difficult or too easy or just right. And yeah, you can share any feedback you have. That's all then.